Babies, my babies, how are we? All right, so we're at chapter 6 and full-blown confession. There are moments where I kind of love when I'm frustrated. It's like an irky kind of like thing that develops in me. What happened yesterday is the strategy analysis, I was literally just going for the entire, like I started with this video. This is take 2 on the video. Completely deleted the other one because it was me not really understanding where I am not really understanding myself. So, in full like transparency, for some fucking reason, the sentences they're using in this fucking chapter is much longer and kind of using like different words. Like, for example, strategy defines the most effective way to apply the capabilities of an enterprise in order to reach a desired set of goals and objectives. That's a normal sentence we're used to in this book. But then here's something else. If you go here to this area here, I'm only highlighting it so I can actually show it to you. Strategy analysis knowledge area describes the business analysis work that must be performed to collaborate with stakeholders in order to identify a need or strategic or tactical importance, highlighted the business need, comma, enable the enterprise to address the need, comma, align the resulting strategy for a change in higher and lower level strategies. This shit makes sense for me right now. Yesterday, it made no fucking sense. And all I did was apply the 3-time rule that I have. So what I've been doing as I'm actually like going through like my approach, which right now I could say my strategy in approaching these. Because yesterday I was like, what's the difference between a strategy and a plan? A strategy is a planned approach. A plan is basically just reflecting on the notes taken, the points that we need to be reaching or that make sense or matter. And I went back and forth with that for 12 minutes yesterday until I was like, you know what, man, the people that are probably going to be watching this, or if this is actually to make any sense to anyone, including me, this cannot be done this way. But I put no effort at all in anything other than reading the whole chapter 6.0, basically, reading it from A to Z, once just reading it for the sake of reading it, right? So I'm going to start with this. Strategy. What does it mean? A plan of action designed to achieve a long-term or overall aim. Aha. Now, the art of planning and directing overall military operations and movements in a war or battle, whatever. A plan for directing, it's still the same. So basically, strategy is mainly used from a military's perspective. It's the plan of action, the art of planning and directing the operation, right? The movements. It's the actual approach that we have. So that's the difference between what's a strategy and what's a plan. A strategy is basically a plan of approach to the plan. Or at the very least, because in chapter 1 we were discussing what? Business analysis, planning, and monitoring. And that's where it got to me, because like business analysis, planning, and monitoring is literally just us making a plan. So what's the difference between that and the strategy? Strategy is how we approach the plan. I get it. All of you know what the fuck it was. I thought I knew what strategy meant. But I tried to make sense of what they're talking about, and it just couldn't like fit in my head. Like, why a full different chapter for these kind of things? And then it hit me. We're not strategizing at the beginning because in chapter 3, we actually are planning the engagement and planning the businesses. But from that plan, we're actually coming up with a strategy in order for us to be most efficient and effective in our work. Yay! So, now that I've explained to you this kind of stuff and what process I went through, let's dig in. So a strategy defines the most effective way to apply the capabilities of an enterprise in order to reach the desired set of goals and objectives. It defines a way where we're not wasteful. It defines the ways where we are most targeted, where we are most broad. It really depends on what it is that we're doing. But ultimately, a strategy is the method of approach that we come close to in order to like get things done. Strategies may exist for the entire enterprise, for a division, department, or region, for a product, project, or iteration. So you can strategize everything, including your own basically outlook. You can strategize, I'm going to look at it this way and see what happens, and I'm going to look at it that way and see what comes out. And then from there, you kind of pick a better approach. And that's basically you strategizing. The strategy analysis knowledge area describes the business analysis work that must be performed to collaborate with stakeholders. Basically, the knowledge area describes the work that the business analysis has to be doing in order to collaborate with stakeholders so that we identify needs and strategic tactical importance. Also, to enable the enterprise to address that need, because like we strategically have to address the need from the enterprise section, from our section, and all that stuff. And we have to align the resulting strategy for the change with higher and lower level strategy. Ultimately, if we have different departments having different strategies, they kind of have to fulfill the overall direction that we're going, which is a strategy on its own. So everything right now is split into a different dimension. Before, we split it into the planning dimension, where we're structuring things. And then we split it into the elicitation and the actual collaboration. And all of these are basically eventually going to create some form of momentum, some sort of harmony, some sort of movement. And that's where strategy is actually like prudent. I don't want to say required. Prudent, poignant. How do you spell that? Poignant. But like not necessary, but that's where its value is. That's where its value shines the most. So strategy analysis focuses on defining the future and transition states needed to address the business need. And the work required is defined both by that need and the scope of the solution space. Naturally, we are strategizing towards an end result. So ultimately, you have to understand the scope, you have to understand the need, and you kind of have to understand the work required for that kind of stuff. It covers strategic thinking and business analysis, as well as the discovery or imagining of possible solutions that will enable the enterprise to create greater value for stakeholders. So we're going to use the strategy in order to explore the solutions and to basically create better value. Great. And or capture more value for itself. So a strategy could capture value for itself in a way where it kind of like is refined in the process, maybe. Strategy analysis provides context for requirement analysis and design definition for a given change. So here they're pointing at what strategy analysis would actually provide. So it gives us an overall context in terms of like walk, don't run, or move swiftly, not like aimlessly, or something like this, or not heavily, I guess. Strategy analysis should be performed as a business need is identified. This allow like okay, so like with every business need, we kind of have to refer to the strategy analysis because the strategy analysis feeds back into the strategy itself. This allows stakeholders to make the determination of whether to address that need or not. Granted, because if our strategy kind of includes something like this, would actually benefit from that from that need, or would benefit from that like change or that value that might be provided or something like this, then we actually have to like look at it. And if the need doesn't really comply with the strategy, then maybe we have to change the strategy. This allows stakeholders to make the determination of whether to address the need or not. Strategy analysis is ongoing activity that assesses any changes that is needed in its context or new information that may indicate that the adjustment of change strategy might be required. So the strategy analysis is basically what leads to the change strategy. And they actually say it here because ultimately, like the next four chapters are analyzing the current state, defining the future state, assessing risk, and then defining the change strategy. Because like we look at what we have right now, we look at what we want to have in the future, or what this might lead to what we have right now in the future. We assess the risks of the movement, and then we kind of like define the change strategy. All of that is the change strategy, and the change strategy is going to be based on the analysis that we do right now. And so what we're learning is about strategy analysis. The following image illustrates the spectrum of value as business analysis activities progress from delivering potential value to. So this is the structure right now, and we get one of those like they call it a spectrum. All right, so let's read this chart. On the left there's potential, but there's an arrow to it, and the right there's actual, which is like an arrow to it as well. So the requirement analysis and defined definition seems to be the one in the center. And we look at the requirements and the design, and from there, strategy analysis basically points at the need, which is the potential. And I have no idea. All right, I'm going to leave this for a minute just to read it out loud. Proof of concept, pilot, beta, operating. Okay, so basically, anytime we're working on strategy, we're working towards the potential. We're taking the required analysis and defined definition, and we're going towards the potential that could happen. And then there's a segment which is like solution evaluation, which is basically chapter 8. And solution evaluation is basically creating the proof of concept, piloting, and operating, which leads to the actual solution being done. So in strategy, we're always like refining how we potentially want to end, where we potentially want to end up. And it seems like the core of this is always like requirements analysis and design, the design definition. So, hoo-hoo, chapter 4. Chapter 5 actually kicked in a beautiful way. Dropped some money there. Anyway, now, when performing strategy analysis, business analysts must consider the context in which they are working naturally and how predictable the range of possible outcomes is. Predictability is the first time they actually like, I don't think they've mentioned it many times before, maybe. Okay, I forgot. But ultimately, that's associated with risk, right? Like if something is predictable, then we kind of like understand the risk of it. And if it's not predictable, then we don't understand the risk of it, which makes it riskier. When a chance will have a predictable outcome, the future state and possible transition states can typically be clearly defined. So predictable outcomes allow us to kind of like predict the future state, clearly define a future state better, and the outcome of the change basically would become like easier to approach or easier to translate into the reality, which is basically the outcome. If the outcome of change is difficult to predict, the strategy may need to focus more on mitigating risk, testing assumptions, and changing course until the strategy that will succeed in reaching the business goals can be identified or until the initiative has ended. So basically, strategy is us, like the strategy is a plan of our approach. And it kind of is pointing that like our strategy could vary depending on the different pieces of the project that we have to kind of like target. So if we look at the project and we can predict its end result, then the strategy might be a lot more direction. But if we're looking at a project and we can't predict the end result, so we kind of have to refine, not using the approach like we're approaching this, but more like we're avoiding that, which is mitigating risk and that what they talked about, and testing assumptions and changing course until a strategy that will succeed in reaching the business goals can be identified. So our strategy is basically to figure out the strategy. These tasks may be performed in order, though they are often performed concurrently, as strategy must be shaped what is actually achievable. The strategy might be captured in a strategic plan, product vision, business case, product roadmap, or other artifacts. The reason they call them artifacts is because these are like side documentation. Strategy analysis knowledge area includes the following tasks: analyze current state, which is understands the business need and how it relates to the way the enterprise functions today, sets the baseline and context for change. And defining the future state, which defines the goals and objectives that will demonstrate the business need has been satisfied, and defines what parts of the enterprise that need to change in order to meet those goals and objectives. Assesses risk, or assess risk. Assesses, yeah, different ES at the end, I guess. Understands the uncertainties around the change, considers the effect of those uncertainties, and may have the ability to deliver value through the change, and recommends actions to address risks where appropriate. And a defined change strategy performs a gap analysis between the current and future state, assesses options for achieving the future state, and recommends the highest value approach for reaching the future state, including the transition states that may be required along the way. And now we go to the core concept model and strategy analysis and how it actually fits. So the business analysis, BACCM, the badass core concept model, describes the relationships. What are the 6 core concepts, babies? Change, need, solution, stakeholder, value, context. That's done. All right, so, and value and context. So change. And during the strategy analysis, business analyst defines the future state to develop a change strategy to achieve the future state. There's a need, identify needs within the current state, and prioritize the needs to determine the desired future state. So I love the fact that there is a core concept model that always allows us to kind of like connect. So imagine these, the change, need, solution, stakeholder, value, and context are your actual plan. Like you literally look at the context of where you are and people that are engaged within the context of where you are, which are the stakeholders. And then basically, what is the need that they're trying to reach and the change that has to happen in order to enter that reach, the solution that would actually bring the change and create that would support the change in order to that would support the change, which will fulfill the needs, and ultimately the value from the solution and from the change itself and from establishing the need. So when it comes to the need, identifying needs with the current state and prioritize needs to determine the desired future state. Amazing. Define the scope of a solution as part of a developing change strategy. Collaborate with stakeholders to understand the business needs and to develop a change strategy and future state that will meet those needs. That's basically on the stakeholders. With the value, examine the potential value of the solution to determine if a change is justified. And with the context, consider the context of enterprise and developing a change strategy. Super simple. And we get the diagram that we've been looking forward to. What is the input? The input are the needs, the influences, the stakeholder engagement approach. Everything we've worked on till now, basically, kind of like could dive into this. Elicitation results, unconfirmed, and the confirmed results. I don't know why there's a big difference between confirmed and unconfirmed results, why they're needed. I think these two, basically, the elicitation results, kind of show us show us how the strategy could actually be shifting, or it kind of shows us a more strategic approach towards stakeholders themselves, because we're looking at the unconfirmed one that we thought we understood and the confirmed one that we ended up with, and the prioritized designs and the prioritized requirements. And these are the inputs that we use here specifically because we kind of like did all the filtration process to get to these. So ultimately, these are what we actually like are the solid aspects of our strategy train of thought. And the tasks in order to complete the strategy analysis: analyze the current state, 6.1, define future state, 6.2, assess risk, 6.3, and define strategy, 6.4. These are the chapters that these are the sub-chapters we're going to dive into. And what are the output? Current state description, business requirements, business objectives, future state description, potential value, risk analysis results, change strategy, and the solution scope. Amazing. 6.1, analyze current state, and I'll see you in the next video. I powered through this one. Love you guys. Bye.